I'm not mad. I'm just disappointed.
I don't know what to say.
Hey guys, welcome back. We are here, of course, today to take a brief break from the Loft Film Fest reviews to talk about the film that, well, everybody else is already talking about. That's right, it's Martin Scorsese's The Irishman. And now you might not believe this, but Scorsese actually cast Robert DeNiro and Joe Pesci to be in this picture. And wow, it's really a dream casting. I've always wanted to see exactly what it would look like if he worked with those great actors. What is The Irishman? Well, for those of you who are unsure, it is a mafia film about Robert De Niro's character, who is a do-it-all man for the mob, but particularly he's a very effective hitman and enforcer. And it's about the friendship he develops, not just with people who bring him into the life and help make him sort of a made man, but also one Jimmy Hoffa, played by Al Pacino. So I guess Jimmy Hoffa, or Jimmy Hoffa, something like that. There's a joke there somewhere.
What you're hired for is to help us, not to f*** us up, you company man.
What's interesting to me about The Irishman is that just like Goodfellas at its core, it kind of is a story about friends. A story like in Goodfellas, you had Ray Liotta who betrays all of his friends, and really it's about all of the people who brought him into the life. And that theme is sort of shared in The Irishman. In this, it's not just about, Harvey Keitel and Joe Pesci, who become sort of mentors to Robert De Niro's character, but also his friendship with Jimmy Hoffa and how that creates sort of a tragedy in its own right. The Irishman is very long. It's about 3 hours and 20 minutes or so, and that is probably the biggest issue I have with the movie because, really quickly I can tell you all the obligatory things everybody else has already said. The acting is really good. Robert De Niro plays more of a timid character than I think you've ever seen before, with a very affected speech pattern and sort of a stutter thrown in there that was very different for him and very effective in most scenes. Joe Pesci, to me, was probably the standout actor in this. I've really missed seeing him on camera, and there's just something about when he works with Scorsese where he's just at his absolute finest. Al Pacino is...
Shut up, Ralph. Shut up!
Al Pacino. I remember a time when he and De Niro were in Heat together, and there was an epic moment in cinema history where they were finally sharing a screen, and that time has gone. No longer is it very special to see those two on screen together, and though the chemistry is very interesting in The Irishman, and though those two characters together form a very interesting story, it really does feel like two actors who in a strange way are just not at their peak and are kind of hitting the familiar beats that you're used to from their storied careers. Not bad performances, but certainly nothing that stood out to me. The technology, yes, everybody has talked for years about how this de-aging technology would be incorporated by Scorsese to show De Niro and Pesci at various points in their life and allowing you to kind of go through a long chronology for all these characters while also making the actors look as they would have 40 or 50 years ago. It's a fascinating idea. I think for me, maybe I've been biased growing up playing a lot of video games that try to do a lot of interesting things with facial mapping. LA Noire stands out, a game where the actors are actually face mapped into the game. And I remember that feeling like, we were entering the Matrix back 10 years ago. But there's always something I've noticed in technology like that as I've seen more of it, and that's no matter how good it is, you always kind of get a plasticky effect at a certain point. Definitely the case here, and seeing it on the big screen. It wasn't the streaming on Netflix that made things look weird. I can tell you it's definitely just the effect. And furthermore, the issue with people like De Niro or Pesci isn't just that their face has aged or that there's more wrinkles, it's that their head shape has changed. I mean, as you age, just the overall shape of your dome is different. That's kind of the problem. When you see De Niro during the war and it's 40 years earlier or something, it's really just not that effective. It looks like a CGI or video game rendering. Kind of between there, talking about acting, but also the de-aging. Anna Paquin plays one of Robert De Niro's daughters, but it's like Anna Paquin as like his teenage daughter through like the 30s or her 30s. Kind of strange. I mean, she's not a teenager. She hasn't been for a long time. So it was kind of just a weird choice. They've got a child playing that role for a while, and then just anything of legal age was just like Anna Paquin in her late 30s or whatever the she is now. Now I'm gonna let you all go home. I'm not gonna be like Scorsese. I'm gonna try to keep this brief. When I entered this review, I said I was disappointed. It's hard to articulate exactly why, but I'm gonna give it a shot here. At 3 hours and 20 minutes, I have seen films that can keep my attention and that are very fascinating. I was told coming into The Irishman by several people that the first hour is boring. I actually disagree. I thought the first hour was fascinating and really engaging. I'm all right with a slow ramp up of energy. At no point did I feel like what I was seeing was too extraneous, that it was unnecessary. Did I feel like anything was poorly shot or poorly written necessarily? However, it is still about at least an hour too fucking long. The last half an hour or so, because I've seen people say, you can break it up, make it a mini series, and then, the last episode is from this point forward. That last 45 minutes or so, by itself, it was somehow, I imagine, worse than it was in the movie. The film just, it fizzles out so slowly, so painfully slowly, that at no point are you like, oh, this is a waste of time, but you're like, I get the point. Why are we dragging this out? And I think it's because even when you are a fantastic director like Scorsese, who, despite this not being my favorite film in his collection, definitely hasn't lost a step. He's still a fantastic director. When you go to someone like Netflix who will finance you and kind of give you what you want because, you're Scorsese and they really want your project, that can be a blessing or a curse. And I really feel like he needed someone to help rein him in and say, look, this 30-minute long shot of, 7,000 frame per second slow-mo of a wedding nobody cares about is probably not necessary for the final film since you use the same effect like 20 other times. This 5-minute scene of DeNiro sitting in a chair pondering life and his existence, well, probably superfluous at a certain point. That, to me, was the biggest disappointment in The Irishman. I've heard other complaints like that the women don't have enough dialogue. Yeah, I think that's probably true. And I would say, while I agree with that point, a bigger point is that all the side characters, women included and at the forefront, had they had more characterization and more dialogue to flesh that story out, it might have then been a more interesting 3.5-hour ride. As it stands, I wouldn't tell anybody not to watch it. However, I have a very strong urge to sit down with this movie and cut it down by an hour and then share that with people. So it's probably the most tepid recommendation I'll ever make on this site. It is a film that I think is pretty. It is something that'll satisfy your urge if you're looking for just a little more of that Goodfellas spirit out of Scorsese. But at the end of the day, it is, albeit pleasant, it is a chore. Kind of like painting houses. That was a perfectly timed text. Ding was just like, hey, he made a pun.